Welcome, everyone. Today we are talking about the book Originals by Adam Grant. The tagline is How Non-conformists Move the World. Let's start to summarize and get to the big ideas of this book. Today we're going to be doing chapter 1. This book is pretty amazing. Okay, so let me first ask you, before we get started, do you consider yourself an innovator? Do you consider yourself someone who innovates, who goes above and beyond the standard? And how often do you do that? How often do you do that? Do you feel like you're one of those people, and do you do it often? Also, how hard is it to do it? Do you feel that it comes easy? Do you feel that it comes hard? And I'm, again, not here to judge. These are just opener questions. Think about these things. Because in this book, Adam Grant goes through this description and profile of how people innovate and become quote-unquote originals. The premise and the big idea of this first chapter is basically this. What makes someone original? Before I even get to it, I want to give you a little taste of this, which is, it goes like this. They did some research, and they went through about 30,000 people, employees of companies. And they divided the groups up into two kinds of people. One, the person who had a short-lived career at the job, and the person or people who had long-lived careers. It lasted for some time. They weren't job hoppers. They were people who, again, the careers lasted for some time. So they divided these people up into these two groups. And what they were trying to do is discover what are the traits of these people. What's the differentiator between someone who has this short-lived and just moves on career versus someone who has this long-term career. And out of 30,000 people, they discovered something in particular. And it was this. It was that. This is incredible. The people who had short-lived careers all used the default browser, Internet Explorer or Safari. So if they were on a Mac, they used Safari. If they were on Windows, they used Internet Explorer. And the people who had these long-lived careers, they were people who used Firefox and Chrome. That's it. So for some reason, the people who are long-lived careers use Firefox and Chrome. Now, why? What's going on here? What's the deal? Is what Grant is saying. So the first idea, or the way that they tried to assess this, was that perhaps the Firefox and Chrome people knew more technology. And that's why they advanced in their careers. That's what made them stick around. They just knew more technology. They were up on the technology. And what they found was that wasn't the reason. So what they concluded was this simple idea, which is the whole idea of pretty much the book, and particularly chapter 1, which is that the people who use Firefox and Chrome have longer careers or long-lived careers is because they did not stick with the default. They consciously made an effort to go beyond what was the default pattern or what was given to them. That's it. And the people who had short-lived careers, they stuck with the default. If the browser was Internet Explorer on Windows, they just used that. If it was Safari, they just used that. They did not make this effort of, I wonder if there's a better option. I wonder if there's another browser that could maybe be a little better than the default. They didn't even discover. So why is this idea so important? Is that it shows that that's what makes someone the original. That's what makes someone have these long-lived careers, do these cool things, is they go beyond the default. That's the premise. They go beyond what's handed to them. They make an effort to see what's next and what's better. I found this so amazing to me, because even for myself, when I think about these things, Grant really has you think like, wow, am I just doing the default? What's interesting too is that he mentions that unfortunately 2/3 of the world are Internet Explorer users, in the sense that most people stick to the default. And what's more sad or scary about that is that they not only stick to the default, even when they have a shortcoming. So let's say you know your shortcoming, you'll be biased against that shortcoming. Let me re-explain this. So let's say they found, research shows, and mentioned in the book, that people who were more in poverty, were more prone to income inequalities, were actually more likely to allow the government to create these income inequalities if there was some need. That it would be okay in some cases. Yet high-income earners thought that it was not okay to ever allow the government to do that. So what they found was that people, when they have these inequalities or when they have these shortcomings, stick more to these shortcomings. There's this pull to stick to what seems like your shortcoming actually just perpetuates. So if you stick to the default, you stick to the default even more. Or what they found was that if someone didn't like someone who was running for, some candidacy, if the default thing was that he was more likely to win, then people would like him more. And if he was more likely to lose, then people would just like him less. It was just that the default has such a strong pull on people. So this is just extraordinary, that the default has a strong pull on people. And when I say the default, what I mean is by the status quo, whatever the basic thing is, whatever is known, whatever the basic traditions are, the known traditions are, is what people stick to. The next big idea of this chapter is that people who are original don't have special DNA that make them original. Like a lot of people think, right, that, Michelangelo, Steve Jobs, Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, Bill Gates, Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., these are all people that were meant to be innovators. It was in their DNA. And he debunks this and calls it a myth and a misunderstanding, that it is not the case. And this blew my mind, because I know a lot of us think that way, but he totally flips this upside its head and sort of, in my eyes, goes against what Gladwell's Outliers, which kind of leans towards that idea that people, it's luck and smarts and environment and connections. That's kind of what makes, these people be these outliers. But what Grant is saying is that that's not the case. That's not the case. It's actually that these people have the same fears. And he goes on and on to prove that by bringing up stories of all these people that they all didn't want. And he brought quotes of like Martin Luther King Jr. of how he never wanted to sort of, it was the last thing for him to want to go into, everything was pushed to the edge. Michelangelo was scared of painting the Sistine Chapel. George Washington didn't want to really become president right away. He brought all these quotes and stories that these people always sort of had fears of going above that default, they didn't necessarily want to do it right away. They were scared, they were fearful, they moved away from it as much as they could, until they were pushed into it somehow, or somehow it just got to them and they had to do it, and then they made the decision to go to that next level and step above the default. So this is an important idea that these people have the same fears and move away from this original idea that they might have, or something that is there that they want to go towards. Move away from it first. They're nervous from it. They're scared of it, until they lean in and move towards it. The third big idea of this chapter is that these original people, these originals, quote unquote, or entrepreneurs, or however you want to describe it, are not people who love to necessarily take reckless risks. And again, he goes on to prove that with the same stories that these people avoided in every way, these risks. So these people who are originals are not necessarily the biggest risk takers out there. They're not people who want to jump out of a plane. People assume that that's what people like Bill Gates are and Steve Jobs. These are just these crazy risk takers. They're not. They make calculated risks. They're scared of jumping this thing. They want to make sure. They want to do everything they can to actually test. And Grant weaves in this story of, you've heard of Warby Parker. They sell, online glasses online. You can buy glasses online. You could also bring the frames to your house for free and try them on and send them back and have them do it. These students were students, or some of them were students of his, or they were in the same school, in Wharton School of Business. They were students he knew at the time, and before they launched this idea and it became a success. And he talks about how that was one of his biggest mistakes, was that he actually didn't invest in this company. And that he should have, of course. But he brings the idea that these students that came up with this idea, he weaves in the story of how they weren't just people who just, dropped out of college, and went head over heels into this company, into this business. And he says, unfortunately, that's the reason why he didn't invest in the company, was that he felt that they weren't all in. So Grant, the author of this book, actually reminisces and tells the story of how when he was talking to one of the founders, he said, wow, you're not like quitting school and going all in into this? You're never going to make it. And that they responded, they actually held internships, they held down full-time jobs until this company kind of took off. They didn't just jump in. And then the company did take off. But what he was trying to prove is that these people who take these risks, and he goes on to tell stories of even the founder of eBay, and these people held full-time jobs for years, whatever they could do until their side project sort of, came to fruition, until it made a certain amount of income, until it passed these validity tests, until things kind of came together, then they went in, they went all in. So that's important to know that these originals, when you're looking for an original idea, when you're not looking for an original idea, I mean when you are thinking of following this original idea and taking it to the next levels, moving above the default, this fear is normal. And this idea of, sort of testing it slowly is fine, and that's what it is. So he's going to go on to talk about how do we actually, when we have these ideas, how do we implement them? How do we get on the path to implement these ideas? But again, I just want to end with the big idea, which is that original people go beyond the default. Originals go beyond the default. They consciously choose something better. They look for something better outside of what's given to them and the default pattern. When I read a lot of these books, sometimes it's difficult to know what to walk away with. Like, what can you implement now in your life, knowing this idea? What can you do now? So, I'll give you something that I think you can do now. One thing I think you can do now with this big idea from Adam Grant's Originals is ask yourself, just simply pause, breathe, in the domain that you are in right now, whatever that is, whether it's you're starting your own business, you have a business, you are in a career, you're thinking of switching, you're in a career but you want to move up, you're in a career that you love, but you're looking for something else. You're passionate about something else, you're looking to switch, whatever it is, whatever your thing right now is going on in your life, can you see a default that everyone's doing? Is there a default pattern? Is there like a basic thing that you're just copying? And ask yourself, with this default, is there how can I go beyond this default? Is there something else that I can do, that I can change to match whatever you feel, to match your authenticity, to match what's going on inside of you? How can you take this default thing and say, hey, this is the default, but what if I were to do it this way? What if I were to do this? That's how you can start to kind of get towards this process and become these people who are originals. Thank you, everyone. This has been The Originals, and we will continue this conversation in the next podcast. Join me in this book club so we can discover the great ideas and analyze and talk about the great ideas that are in these magnificent books. I'll see you guys soon. Take care.